Imagine a door. Not just any door, but a simple locked utility panel on a colossal alien embassy ship, light years away from Earth. Now imagine a man, a tired, single dad named Atticus Kane, who spent his life expecting nothing more than the next broken oxygen scrubber. His life was defined by the dirt under his fingernails and the bills in his pocket. He just wanted a steady paycheck to keep a roof over his brilliant 8-year-old daughter, Scout Vale. But one night, trying to fix a critical system, Atticus opened the wrong door. What he found on the other side wasn't a closet. It was Vexa, the youngest, most controversial diplomat in the entire Valari fleet, mid-change with skin like a tropical ocean. That mistake should have cost him his job, his life, everything. Instead, it became the only reason he was offered a future he never dared to dream of. This is a story about a maintenance worker who accidentally walked into the highest seat of power in the galaxy, and how the simple act of knocking changed the course of two civilizations. Hey everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into the incredible, challenging, and emotional journey of Atticus and Vexa, I have a quick favor to ask. We're working hard to bring you more complex and heartfelt stories like this one, so if you enjoy what you've heard so far, please take 2 seconds to like this video, share it with a friend who loves sci-fi and romance, and most importantly, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Let's hype this community up and reach a larger audience. And now for you, I want to know where in the world you're watching this story from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you have suggestions for what kind of story we should cover next, let me hear them. Your suggestions fuel this channel. Now let's get back to the Nethralis Ascendant and the moment Atticus Kane's universe tilted on its axis. Atticus had learned early on to expect nothing grand from the universe, just the next broken sensor, the next sputtering life support unit, the next unforgiving maintenance request. He was a man with a mind for mechanics and a degree that was worth exactly the laminated paper it was printed on. The dream of a comfortable life had long since evaporated, replaced by a singular, non-negotiable mission: his daughter, Scout Vale. Scout was 8 years old and terrifyingly brilliant. She had his eyes, deep, thoughtful, and too old for her years, but with a spark of fiery optimism that Atticus had misplaced sometime around his 25th birthday. Scout loved nebula charts, telling him stories about mythological space dragons, and making sure her school uniform was absolutely pristine for the orbital academy. That uniform, those advanced classes, the simple air she breathed on a station like Concord Reach, it all cost a small fortune. And that's why Atticus had the job he did. Concord Reach was a floating megalopolis, a nexus of trade, diplomacy, and galactic bureaucracy, far enough from Earth to feel like a separate, glittering world. For the wealthy and the powerful, it was a paradise of crystalline towers and simulated parks. For Atticus and the thousands of technicians, sanitation workers, and low-level staff who kept the station humming, it was a concrete jungle in orbit, cold, loud, and brutally expensive. The only way to keep up with the cost of Scout's ambitious future was to take the most demanding, least sought-after work. And that led him straight to the piece de resistance of the dock, the Nethralis Ascendant. The Nethralis Ascendant wasn't just a ship, it was a statement. It was the embassy vessel of the Valari, an ancient, powerful species from the aquatic homeworld of Valaris. The ship had been docked at Concord Reach for nearly 3 Earth years as part of an ongoing, tense diplomatic summit. A summit Atticus knew nothing about and cared about even less. From the outside, the Nethralis Ascendant was a fluid, almost impossible marvel of engineering. It looked less like a vessel and more like a colossal, bioluminescent sea creature that had somehow been crystallized. Its curved lines and panels shifted in tone from deep sapphire to shimmering turquoise, mirroring the light cycles of the distant oceanic world the Valari called home. If you saw pictures of Valaris, and Atticus had while running diagnostics on the ship's database, you'd understand. It was a world of colossal oceans and crystalline cities that grew out of the seabed like living coral. The Valari themselves were adapted to this existence. Their skin tones ranged from a light, almost translucent azure to a rich, deep indigo. The most striking thing, though, was their natural bioluminescence. It wasn't always on, but under certain conditions, usually when experiencing heightened emotion or moving through low-light areas, their bodies emitted a soft, internal glow that followed the contours of their musculature. Atticus had seen the Valari, of course, but only from a distance or in heavily guarded corridors. They were tall, graceful, and carried an air of serene, almost condescending superiority. To him, they were just the owners of the infrastructure he was paid to maintain. His job was the night shift, specifically maintaining the atmospheric and life support systems in the lower decks of the Nethralis Ascendant. The hours were brutal. Heat clock, and just as the sun was setting over Earth, or at least the simulated sunset on the station, and he wouldn't get back until Scout was already at school. The pay, however, was excellent. Crucially, the job was isolated. In the vast, echoing metallic canyons of the Nethralis Ascendant's utility decks, no one bothered him. He was a ghost in the machine, a silent human presence in a world built for Volari. That isolation was a balm to Atticus's soul. He didn't have to talk to anyone, smile for anyone, or pretend to care about diplomatic protocols. He could just focus on the task, earn the wage, and go home to Scout. That was everything he needed. Just keep the air flowing, the water clean, and the heat exchangers running, he'd mutter to himself, his American accented voice echoing faintly in the silent alien corridors. That's the deal, Kane. Stick to the deal. Tonight, the deal was particularly demanding. A vital subsystem, the primary atmospheric scrubber for the Nethralis Ascendant's diplomatic wing, was throwing a catastrophic error. This wasn't a minor fix. This system filtered the air for the highest-ranking Volari officials. If it failed, it would be an international incident or at least a major dockside panic. Atticus, armed with his ancient, worn-out toolkit, a sentimental object covered in decades of grime and memories, moved with a focused haste he usually reserved for getting Scout to school on time. He navigated the ship's complex, alien-designed labyrinth, relying on a set of heavily encrypted, human-translated maintenance schematics loaded onto his datapad. The schematic led him deep into a section of the diplomatic wing he'd never seen. This area was clearly reserved for the elite. The walls here were not cold, sterile metal, but polished, shimmering panels that subtly changed their bioluminescent pattern as he passed. The air smelled different too, not the synthetic clean scent of the lower decks, but something oceanic and spicy, like sea salt mixed with exotic incense. He finally reached the designated compartment. The schematic showed a utility panel, Access Point A7 Atmos Scrubber Maintenance. The panel was a simple, silver rectangle about chest-high, with a small Volari-scripted display screen that was currently flashing a frantic red warning. Atticus pulled out his master keycard, the one that granted him access to all utility and service areas, and swiped it. Click. The panel light went green. He pulled the handle and the door hissed open, revealing a tight, cramped space choked with pipes, cables, and the humming machinery of the atmospheric scrubber. He sighed, relieved. Okay, standard procedure. He knelt down, his eyes immediately searching for the main power conduit. The error code suggested a localized short circuit. He spent the next 15 minutes contorted, his flashlight beam illuminating dust motes dancing in the exotic air. He found the issue, a burnt-out junction box deep in the back. He replaced it quickly, professionally. The system reset, the red light vanished, replaced by a steady, serene blue glow. Job done. Another crisis averted. Paycheck secured. Atticus wiped the sweat from his brow, his heart rate finally slowing. Time to log the repair and get back to the familiar cold decks below. He closed the A7 panel and sealed it. He then looked at his datapad again to confirm his route out. It was then that he noticed a crucial, terrifying detail in the schematics. A7 is fixed, the log confirmed. But beneath A7 there was an annotation, 8, Diplomatic Suite Personnel Entrance. Access restricted. Atticus scanned the wall again, his blood running cold. There were 3 identical-looking silver panels in a row. A6, A7, and A8. He had fixed A7. But wait. He glanced back at his repair point. That panel was still glowing serene blue. He turned to the one adjacent, the one closest to the main corridor. It had no labeling, just a slightly different texture to the metal. Out of pure, professional habit, he quickly tapped the master keycard against it just to check its status. Beep beep beep. The lock mechanism didn't just disengage, it slid. A segment of the panel retracted silently, and what Atticus had assumed was another locked utility panel wasn't. It was a sliding door, and it led directly into what was unmistakably a private quarter. The space was dimly lit, illuminated only by soft, shifting bioluminescence that seemed to emanate from the walls and the ceiling. The air here was heavy with a complex perfume, and a small, raised platform in the center of the room held what looked like a soaking pool, filled with a cloudy turquoise liquid. Atticus froze, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. This was A8. He hadn't swiped the card. He had merely tapped the reader with his maintenance pass, and the system, designed for rapid security checks, had mistaken it for an authorized entry. Before he could even whisper an apology or slam the door shut, his eyes, trained for years to scan for danger and damage, snagged on the room's sole occupant. It was Vexa, the Volari diplomat. Atticus recognized her instantly from the news feed Scout occasionally watched. She was young for a diplomat, a rising star in the notoriously rigid Volari government, and currently the face of the extremely high-stakes negotiations taking place aboard the Nethralis Ascendant. And she was standing by the soaking pool, completely vulnerable. She wasn't wearing the severe, multi-layered robes that the Volari usually wore in public. She was simply wrapped in a thin, pale cloth. But that wasn't the shocking part. The Volari, being adapted to an aquatic environment, had complex, semi-permeable skin that required periods of specialized hydration and atmospheric conditioning. In this room, her private chamber, the atmospheric pressure and humidity were being rapidly adjusted for a critical change cycle. Vexa's skin, usually a controlled, elegant sapphire blue in the station's general lighting, was now shifting violently in color. It was pulsing from a bright, nearly phosphorescent green to deep violet, and the natural bioluminescence was blazing across her body, a frantic, beautiful, and utterly intimate display. She was caught entirely off guard, mid-preparation, completely focused on the atmospheric adjustment. She looked up at the sudden intrusion of the sliding door, and her eyes, large, black, and perfectly adapted to the deep twilight of Valerie's, met Atticus's. In that singular, split-second, frozen moment, Atticus Kane didn't see an alien diplomat. He saw a startled individual. And she didn't see a maintenance worker. She saw the wrong man in the wrong place at the absolute worst time. His heart didn't just pound, it seized. He knew with terrifying certainty that this single accidental mistake had just put his job, his future, and Scout's entire life into jeopardy. His universe had officially tilted. The silence in the diplomatic suite of the Nethralis Ascendant was thicker and more terrifying than the vacuum of space itself. Atticus's breath hitched in his throat. Every instinct he possessed, the instinct of a working-class man who knew how easily he could be replaced, screamed at him to slam the door, run, and pray that the sophisticated alien surveillance system hadn't logged the 5 seconds of his catastrophic error. But he couldn't move. The sheer vulnerability of the scene held him in place. Vexa, the powerful Volari diplomat, was not radiating the cold, official composure he'd seen on the news feeds. She was utterly unguarded, her shifting colors a biological signature of distress. Her large liquid black eyes were locked onto his, a perfect mirror of panic. The frantic bioluminescence across her skin was the Volari equivalent of a blush and a tremor combined, a dazzling, involuntary display of private emotion. Finally, Atticus found his voice, a strained, American-accented whisper that felt ludicrously loud in the ornate alien chamber. I am so sorry," he stammered, raising his hands in a universal gesture of surrender. "Maintenance. Wrong door. Utility panel A7. I must have mixed up the schematics. My profound apologies, diplomat." He didn't wait for a reply. His hand shot out to the door panel, ready to seal it. But Vexa's voice, a surprising deep contralto that usually commanded entire intergalactic conferences, cut through the silence. "Stop." The single word was not a shout, but a whip crack of authority. Atticus froze, his hand inches from the control. Vexa took one slow, deliberate breath, and the bioluminescence across her body gradually began to subdue, settling back into a calmer, deep violet hue. She slowly drew the pale cloth tighter around herself, her movements regaining the serene, almost regal composure that was her public trademark. She was reclaiming her territory, her dignity. She walked to the edge of the soaking pool, which Atticus now realized was a complex atmospheric regulator, not a simple tub, and looked at him, not with fury but with an unnerving, calculating stillness. "You are maintenance technician Atticus Kane, Sector Beta 9, she stated, her voice now perfectly controlled, the tone flat and precise. "You have been assigned to life support repair in this sector." Atticus swallowed hard. "Yes, diplomat. That's correct. And yet, you are standing in my private hydration chamber, a space designated Level 5 security priority for essential biological conditioning. Your presence here, even for a moment, constitutes a profound breach of protocol and, frankly, a massive security failure." Atticus braced himself for the immediate termination, the loss of his livelihood, the desperate call to Scout School to explain why they would be moving out of Concord Reach. He felt a wave of nausea, thinking of Scout's disappointment. "I accept full responsibility, diplomat," he said, his voice regaining a measure of steadiness born of absolute defeat. "My access card must have briefly interacted with the secondary sensor for A8 while I was closing the A7 panel. It was an involuntary human error. I understand if you wish to file a full security report." "A full security report." That meant immediate expulsion from the station, a black mark on his record that would follow him across 3-star systems. Vexa did not move. She simply studied him. Atticus met her gaze, refusing to look away, unwilling to appear shifty or dishonest. He knew he was beaten, but he would take his lumps with dignity. After a long, agonizing pause, Vexa spoke again, but this time, the precision in her tone was replaced by a curiosity that felt completely out of place. "You saw my condition," she said, her large eyes examining his face, searching for something Atticus couldn't name. Atticus, true to his simple, honest nature, simply nodded. "I saw a temporary shift in your coloration, Diplomat. I assume it's related to the atmospheric conditioning requirements of your species. I know enough of Valari biology from the repair manuals to understand the need for privacy during hydration cycles. I saw nothing that I would consider remarkable." He deliberately undersold the moment. He omitted the breathtaking, involuntary beauty of her shifting skin, the way the light played across her strong features, the raw, private moment he'd intruded upon. He treated it like a mechanical fault, something he saw, noted, and immediately filed away as irrelevant data. Vex's gaze remained fixed on him, but a tiny, almost imperceptible shift occurred in her expression, a faint softening of her usually severe brow. "Remarkable," she echoed, almost to herself. She took a step closer, reducing the already small distance between them. "You do not seem overly surprised. Nor alarmed." "Diplomat," Atticus replied, trying to keep his voice even. "I'm a technician. I spend my nights elbow-deep in the internal workings of life support systems, watching organic filters degrade and atmospheric condensers fail. I see things, I fix them, and I forget them. You are a Valari diplomat on your homeworld's embassy ship. I am a human maintenance worker from Earth. Our two worlds never intersect. I will forget this moment immediately." The truth was he wouldn't. He would never forget the scent of the room, the sound of her voice, or the sight of that shifting bioluminescence. But he had to sell the lie for Scout's sake. Vexa turned away from him and walked back toward the pool. She didn't dismiss him, didn't call security. Instead, she leaned against the railing of the platform, her voice dropping to a low, reflective tone, clearly speaking more to herself than to him. "I am scheduled to depart the station in 2 days, Atticus Kane. I am traveling to Karath Vex to broker a critical peace treaty, a mission the Human Federation has a vested, though minimal, interest in. My position is delicate. My enemies are many. If anything were to be revealed about my private requirements, my physiological cycle, it would be used against me. It would be seen as weakness, as a vulnerability. It would compromise the treaty." Atticus finally understood the gravity of the situation. It wasn't just his job, it was diplomatic fallout. She wasn't just worried about an invasion of privacy, she was worried about international sabotage. "I would never speak of this," Atticus stated firmly, meeting her gaze across the exotic room. "My loyalty is to my contract and my silence is absolute. No one will ever know I opened this door." He waited for her nod of acceptance, the dismissal. It didn't come. Instead, Vexa turned fully to face him, her eyes tracing the lines of fatigue around his own. She saw the worn fabric of his uniform, the faint scorch mark on his tool bag, the subtle slump in his shoulders. She didn't see the heroic Atticus Kane of fiction, she saw a man carrying too much. "Tell me, Atticus Kane," she requested, folding her arms. "Why do you take the most difficult, most isolated, and frankly, most dangerous maintenance assignments on this station? The pay difference is only marginal." Atticus felt a familiar wave of resentment and pride. He was tired of explaining his life to people who had never lived it. But he also knew she was testing him. "I have a daughter, Diplomat," he said simply. "Scout Vale. She is 8. She is brilliant. I take these jobs because they have the best healthcare package and the longest uninterrupted hours. I need the money to pay for her schooling at the Orbital Academy. I need the hours to ensure I can be home when she is. That is the only calculation in my life." Vexa tilted her head slightly, a distinctly non-human gesture of contemplation. "A daughter. And the risk? You accept the risk of working alone on an alien vessel, far from security for her future." "I accept the risk," Atticus confirmed. "It's what a father does." A long moment passed. The soft, ambient light of the Valari chamber seemed to concentrate the tension between them. Atticus was ready to leave, but he knew he couldn't leave until she gave the all-clear. Vexa straightened up. She walked past the pool and came to a stop just a few feet from the still-open door, right on the threshold between her world and his. "I believe you, Atticus Kane. I believe in the simplicity of your motivation. And because I believe your silence is motivated by the need to protect your daughter's future, I will not file a report that would destroy it. Atticus felt an overwhelming, dizzying rush of relief. He almost sagged against the doorframe. Thank you, Diplomat. However, Vexa interrupted, holding up a hand. I require more than silence. I require absolute assurance that this is contained. She looked down at his tool bag, then back at his face. You are efficient. You are quiet. And you are, judging by the schematics, the only person on this dock who can navigate the lower decks without leaving a digital footprint. She paused, letting the magnitude of her next proposal settle over him. I do not need a maintenance technician. I need a confidential operative. I have a mission, a discreet, sensitive operation that must be completed before the Nethralis Ascendant departs for Karath Vex. It requires someone completely off the grid, someone with access to every utility area, and someone I know, for certain, will not speak a word of it to anyone. Someone who has everything to lose if they fail, but everything to gain if they succeed. Vexa stepped closer and her eyes, now a calm, deep indigo, were intense. Atticus Kane. I'm not offering you a way to save your job. I'm offering you a way to change your life. I am offering you enough to secure your daughter's future for a decade instantly. But you must, for the next 2 days, work only for me. Atticus was utterly shell-shocked. His accidental trespass was somehow becoming the opportunity of a lifetime. The universe, which had only ever given him broken parts and massive bills, was suddenly offering him a blank check. What is the mission, Diplomat? He asked, his voice steady now. Vexa allowed a faint, humorless smile to touch the edges of her lips. The mission, Atticus, is simple. I need to make sure I arrive at Karath Vex alive. And to do that, I need you to find the traitor on my ship. The air in the diplomatic suite felt charged, humming with the tension of an unscheduled, unsanctioned alliance. Atticus Kane, the quiet maintenance worker, was now standing at the precipice of galactic espionage, his toolkit suddenly feeling heavy, irrelevant. A traitor, Diplomat? Atticus asked, his mind racing to catch up with the sheer absurdity of the situation. You're talking about an assassination attempt on a diplomatic ship. This is beyond my pay grade. This is interstellar security. Vexa stepped fully into the main corridor, her face now a picture of cool, Valari resolve. She had sealed the door to her private chamber with a complex gesture on the control panel, a finality that severed their connection to the moment of panic and anchored them in the reality of the mission. Exactly, Atticus Kane. It is interstellar security, which means it is controlled by the highest-ranking officials. Officials I no longer trust. Vexa's voice was low, confidential, perfectly masked from the sophisticated audio sensors of the Nethralis Ascendant. The peace treaty I am carrying to Karath Vex is highly controversial within the Valari governance structure. There are factions who believe this treaty, which establishes shared mining rights and trade routes, weakens our traditional power. These factions want me silenced before I reach the negotiation table. She began to walk slowly down the metallic corridor, expecting Atticus to follow, drawing him into her confidence with every deliberate step. I have reason to believe that a sabotage operative, someone within my own inner circle, has been planted on this vessel, Vexa continued. The Nethralis Ascendant is the safest ship in the fleet, heavily shielded against external attack. Therefore the threat must come from within. Atticus walked slightly behind her, a simple, non-threatening shadow in a maintenance uniform. He felt a weird, protective surge despite the danger. This wasn't just a job, it was about saving a life, and potentially saving a peace accord. What exactly have you observed, Diplomat? An attack. A direct threat. No. Nothing direct. My suspicions are technical, and that is where you come in. Over the past 6 rotations, there have been 3 seemingly minor, unrelated incidents. First, an unauthorized rerouting of the secondary energy conduit for my shuttle bay. Minor, easily fixed. Second, a brief, unscheduled drop in the hydrostatic balance of my environmental controls. You experienced the consequence of that when you opened the door. And third, a highly specific low-level data packet was transmitted from the main navigation array, disguised as routine stellar drift calculations. Vexa stopped by a recessed wall panel, her bioluminescence shifting from indigo to a faint, stressed green. Separately they are nothing. Together they form a signature. A slow, systematic preparation for a critical failure, a failure that will appear to be an accident, likely during the ship's jump into the outer quadrant. Atticus was an engineer at heart. His mind immediately went to the schematics, piecing the puzzle together. Rerouted power, environmental stress, navigation data leak. They're setting up a chain reaction, he deduced, his technical mind cutting through the diplomatic jargon. They're softening the target. The rerouted power ensures a localized surge, the environmental stress weakens the structural integrity, and the data leak pinpoints the vessel's precise trajectory during the jump, allowing them to time the trigger with maximum destructive force. Vexa turned, a flicker of genuine appreciation in her dark eyes. Precisely. I spent a rotation explaining that to my security chief, and he dismissed it as coincidence. He lacks your clarity, Atticus Kane. Or perhaps, he is part of the conspiracy. She held out a small metallic data chit, no bigger than his thumbnail. This contains highly encrypted data. It is the original log files for the 3 incidents, stripped of all standard security overlays. My team has not seen this. Your mission is simple but requires absolute stealth. Vexa's mission parameters. Analyze the data. Use your access to the lower deck mainframes, the ones where the environmental and power logs are stored, to cross-reference this data chit with the entire maintenance history of the Nethralis Ascendant. Identify the weak point. Pinpoint the exact system that the operative plans to use for the final fatal sabotage. Identify the operative. Track the access logs of the individual who initiated the primary rerouting of the energy conduit. That individual is the traitor. I cannot access the high-level security mainframes, Vexa explained. They are monitored by the very people I suspect. But the lower deck mainframes, the maintenance cores you work on every night? They are only monitored for equipment failure. You are already authorized to be in those systems. You are invisible. Atticus looked at the data chit in his hand. It felt impossibly light, yet carried the weight of intergalactic peace. This wasn't about tightening a bolt. This was about saving a peace treaty that could stabilize the region for centuries. And the reward? You spoke of securing my daughter's future for a decade, Atticus prompted, practical even in the face of imminent danger. Vexa didn't flinch. If you succeed, Atticus Kane, a diplomatic account will be opened in your daughter's name, Scout Vale, with enough credits to see her through the Orbital Academy, the best university on Earth, and whatever advanced degree she desires. No taxes, no questions. Untouchable by either human or Valari bureaucracy. This is my promise. The offer was staggering. It wasn't just money, it was freedom. It was the guarantee that Scout would never have to worry about rent or broken pipes. She could chase her dreams without looking back. And if I fail? Atticus asked, needing to know the cost. Vexa's gaze became cold, crystalline. If you fail, the Nethralis Ascendant suffers a catastrophic accident. And you, Atticus Kane, will be blamed for system negligence, which is a far cleaner end than having to deal with a human who knows too much. But I trust your motivation. A father's love for his child is the purest security measure in the galaxy. Atticus thought of Scout, her bright eyes, her eager mind, the way she would clutch her worn copy of A Wrinkle in Time before bedtime. He would do anything for her. This was the ultimate risk for the ultimate reward. I accept, Diplomat, he said, his voice firm. He tucked the data chit deep into the internal pocket of his uniform. I will start with the power rerouting logs. That is the initial access point. Vexa nodded once, a gesture of finality. You have 2 Earth cycles before the ship departs. Find the weakness. Find the traitor. Do not communicate with me unless you have definitive results. Go, Atticus Kane. And be invisible. Atticus turned and walked back into the deeper, darker corridors of the lower decks. The next 48 hours would be a blur of technical jargon, sleepless paranoia, and working entirely against the clock. He spent the first night running the data chit through his secure terminal in the maintenance core. The lower-level mainframes were a complex, almost liquid network of data, the perfect place for a technician to hide, and the perfect place for a conspirator to lay a trap. He found the access log almost immediately. The rerouting of the shuttle bay power wasn't executed by a high-ranking officer. It was done by someone using a naval architect's ID, a mid-level, trusted position. The ID belonged to a Valari named Zephyr. Atticus's heart pounded. Zephyr. That was the traitor. But then he saw the second, terrifying layer of the conspiracy. The access logs for the environmental stress, the hydrostatic balance drop, were not tied to Zephyr. They were tied to a different, high-ranking ID, Commander Carwell, the very chief of security Vexa had spoken to. The plot was deeper than Vexa suspected. It wasn't one traitor, it was a conspiracy involving at least 2 high-ranking Valari officials, a naval architect to create the weakness, and the security chief to mask the subsequent steps and ensure the final sabotage goes undiscovered. The gravity of confronting Commander Carwell, the head of Valari security, hit Atticus with the force of a plasma blast. He was just a maintenance man. But he had a promise to keep and a daughter to protect. He spent the rest of the night cross-referencing KRLL's access with the navigation leak. The commander had indeed accessed the navigational mainframe just hours before the accidental data packet was transmitted. The final piece of the puzzle, the exact location of the fatal sabotage. The data leak had highlighted a specific section of the ship, the junction where the central plasma core meets the primary warp drive conduits. If the environmental integrity was compromised there, and the power rerouted to cause a surge at that moment, the ship would tear itself apart, making it look like an engine failure due to the highly unstable jump conditions of Karath Vex quadrant. Atticus didn't need Vex's approval. He knew what he had to do. He had to physically enter that high-security junction, not just to fix the problem, but to create a permanent, undetected failsafe. He packed his toolkit with specialized shielding wire and a powerful military-grade frequency jammer he'd secretly kept since his brief, failed stint in the Earth Navy. This was no longer about maintenance. This was about sabotage prevention, infiltration, and the desperate, quiet heroism of a father protecting his child's future, alone on an alien ship with a traitor for a security chief. The maintenance tunnels of the Nethralis Ascendant had always been Atticus Kane's sanctuary, a place of simple logic and predictable physics. But now, with the weight of Vex's life and the fate of the Karath Vex Treaty resting on his shoulders, they felt like a cage. Every hum of the machinery was a warning, every flickering light a sign of danger. He had two primary problems. First, he had to physically infiltrate the main plasma core junction, a level 4 restricted zone, to install a failsafe. Second, he had to avoid detection from Commander Carol, the traitorous chief of security, who was likely monitoring every abnormal power draw or access ping. Atticus, the former Earth Navy technician, pulled out his old, secret weapon, the military-grade frequency jammer. It was bulky, illegal on the station, and about to be his best friend. He devised a plan based on distraction and misdirection. He knew KRLL's security system was designed to catch high-level diplomatic interference, not low-level technical noise. He started by setting up a cascade of minor, non-critical faults across 3 different sectors of the ship: a sputtering HVAC unit on Deck 3, a slightly leaky nutrient line on Deck 9, and a phantom power surge near the main docking clamps. All small enough to be dismissed as routine Nethralis Ascendant night shift failures, but numerous enough to overload the low-level maintenance monitoring system. "Let's give them something else to look at," he muttered, his voice a low, raspy whisper. With the alerts flashing across the security dashboards, Atticus made his move. He accessed the final vital section, the junction where the central plasma core met the primary warp drive conduits. This was the target zone, the structural weak point Zephyr had exploited and KRYL planned to activate. The access panel was slick, seamless Valari metal, guarded by an optical scanner and a biometric lock. His standard keycard was useless. But Atticus didn't use his keycard. He used his knowledge. The junction relied on a constant, precise magnetic seal to contain the plasma core. Atticus knew that if he briefly inverted the polarity of the minor magnetic stabilizers surrounding the lock, the system would momentarily interpret the flux as a seal failure and disengage the lock for a fraction of a second, attempting to reset the polarity. He quickly attached 2 small, custom-made contact probes from his toolkit onto the outer casing, injecting a reverse magnetic pulse. The door slid open silently. He was inside. The junction room was intimidating. It was a massive, humming cavity dominated by the colossal plasma core containment field, pulsing with a deep, internal blue light. The air was thick with the ozone scent of pure energy. Here, the beautiful bioluminescence of the Valari ship gave way to the raw, terrifying power of a propulsion system capable of ripping holes in spacetime. His target was a specific structural support beam that Zephyr had subtly weakened using environmental conditioning, a process only Valari environmental experts would have recognized. KRLL's plan was to route the power surge directly into this compromised beam, causing it to vaporize upon warp jump initiation, resulting in catastrophic hull failure. Atticus knelt, working fast. He pulled out his specialized shielding wire, a custom-braided titanium and polymer alloy. Instead of fixing the weakness, which KRLL would simply re-exploit, Atticus decided to redirect the surge's energy entirely. He methodically wove the shielding wire around the compromised structural node and into a separate, redundant power drain that led deep into the main stabilizer array, a system designed to absorb massive energy fluctuations. If the surge was triggered, the energy would be harmlessly siphoned off and neutralized, turning the assassination attempt into a minor power spike. It took him nearly an hour. Sweat beaded on his brow, mingling with the grease and oil. The whole time he had the frequency jammer on, creating a bubble of electronic silence around himself, hoping it would mask the minute energy fluctuation created by his custom wiring. Finally the work was done. He stepped back, observing his work, an undetectable, beautiful piece of engineering buried deep within the ship's guts. He'd done it. The assassination attempt was neutralized. But his victory was short-lived. As he was closing the panel, securing his handiwork, his data pad, which he had kept strictly offline, pinged with a high-priority, encrypted internal message. It was from Vexa. Atticus Kane. You are compromised. Commander Carwell is moving to your sector. Abandon mission. Abandon ship. His heart dropped. Carwell knew. The chief of security must have noticed the subtle pattern in the routine system faults Atticus had created, or perhaps the minute power drain of the frequency jammer. Atticus didn't hesitate. He slammed the junction panel shut, reset the magnetic lock and pulled the frequency jammer out, tossing it into a waste chute 2 decks below, destroying the evidence. He was seconds away from escaping the area when the main corridor lights snapped on, flooding the metallic passage with harsh, sterile white light. Standing at the end of the corridor, flanked by 2 towering, armored Volari security guards, was Commander Carwell. Carwell was huge, his skin a deep, battle-scarred indigo, and his eyes burned with ruthless suspicion. Maintenance technician Atticus Kane. Carwell's voice was a low, resonant growl, perfectly translated by the universal comms in Atticus's helmet. You are ordered to halt and submit to immediate detainment. You have been observed in a restricted area, tampering with core propulsion systems. Atticus knew he couldn't outrun or fight 3 Volari guards. His only weapon was the truth, and he had to deliver it to Vexa before Carwell silenced him. He raised his hands slowly, projecting an image of cooperation, but his mind was running 1,000 miles an hour. Commander Carwell, Atticus spoke clearly, projecting his voice. I was fixing a suspected plasma containment flux anomaly, which turned out to be a power drainage problem. You know this area is vulnerable. I have the logs. Silence, human, Carwell commanded, taking a menacing step forward. You are the anomalous flux. You have been in unsanctioned communication with the chief diplomat Vexa. You are her operative, and you are attempting to interfere with the necessary security measures of this vessel. This was it. Carwell was twisting the narrative, turning the counter-sabotage into the sabotage itself. I have uncovered the plot, Commander, Atticus pressed on, trying to buy time, his eyes searching desperately for a comms panel. Zephyr rerouted the shuttle bay power. You masked the environmental stress. The intent is to cause a core rupture during the warp jump to Karath Vex. Carwell's eyes narrowed, confirming Atticus's accusation. Take him. Now. The 2 Volari guards moved with terrifying speed. Atticus saw the immediate, fatal threat. He knew detention meant a quick, silent termination. In a desperate, reckless move, Atticus didn't run. He threw his heavy, old-fashioned toolkit, the one he carried everywhere, directly at the head of the nearest security guard. The guard, trained for energy weapons, not blunt metal objects, was momentarily stunned. Atticus used the split-second advantage to duck under the second guard's arm and sprint toward the main corridor junction, where he knew there was an unmonitored security override terminal. Stop him. Carwell roared, finally losing his cool, his bioluminescence spiking to a furious red. Atticus reached the terminal, his fingers flying across the controls. He wasn't transmitting a message, he was activating an alarm, not a general alert, but the A8 distress beacon, the internal emergency signal tied directly to Vexa's diplomatic suite. It was the only way to bypass Carwell's security lockdown. Beep beep beep. The entire corridor strobe lighted red. Atticus looked back. Carwell had drawn an energy pistol. Atticus knew he had seconds before the blast. I told her you were the traitor, Commander? Atticus yelled, just as he heard the unmistakable sound of a high-speed diplomatic shuttle approaching the corridor's emergency lift shaft. Before Carwell could fire, a figure burst from the lift. Vexa, completely cloaked in her formal, imposing diplomatic robes, looking every bit the ruthless politician she was. She was followed by 2 Volari naval officers, their weapons drawn and trained directly on Carwell and his guards. Vexa's voice sliced through the chaos, cold and absolute. Commander Carwell, stand down. You are under arrest for treason against the Volari Protectorate. Release the human technician immediately. The intervention was instantaneous and overwhelming. Vexa, the brilliant diplomat, hadn't relied solely on a maintenance man's word. She had utilized her own sophisticated network. The eight distress beacon Atticus triggered was the confirmation she needed. As she stood before Commander Carroll, flanked by loyal naval officers, her bioluminescence was not frantic, but blazing with the cold light of ultimate authority. She represented the entire Volari peacekeeping faction, and Carwell was nothing more than a failed insurgent. Commander Carwell, Vexa repeated, her voice echoing down the pristine corridor of the Nethralis Ascendant. Your access logs confirm your complicity in the rerouting of power and manipulation of the navigational data. You attempted to frame this human, this innocent maintenance worker, to cover your treasonous agenda. Your game is over. Carwell, defeated but defiant, glared at Atticus. He had no right to interfere. The treaty weakens us. The treaty ensures peace, something your petty power grab has nearly destroyed, Vexa countered. She made a swift gesture. Secure him and his guards. Interrogate the naval architect, Zephyr. I want a full confession and a clean security report filed within the hour. The ship departs on schedule. The Volari officers moved professionally, subduing Carwell and his men. Atticus, leaning against the cold metal wall, watched the chaos dissipate as quickly as it had erupted. He was safe. He had won. And more importantly, Scout was secure. Vexa dismissed the officers, leaving her and Atticus alone once more in the quiet, metallic passage. The danger had passed and the silence returned. But this time, it was one of shared experience, not tension. She walked towards him, her elegant robes rustling faintly. Atticus Kane, she said, her voice softening, losing its steely diplomatic edge. You are more than a maintenance technician. You are a man of impeccable instinct, loyalty, and courage. You did not just save my life, you saved the peace accord. You have fulfilled your obligation and much more. Atticus pushed off the wall, feeling the exhaustion finally hit him. I did what I had to do, diplomat. For my daughter. The failsafe is installed. The surge will be neutralized. You will arrive at Karath Vex safely. I know, Vexa replied, a genuine smile finally touching her lips. Your custom wiring is a work of art. The Volari engineering team will never detect it, but it will save my ship. I have already initiated the transfer of the funds we discussed to the account for Scout Vale. It is done, Atticus. Her future is secured. Atticus felt a lump in his throat. He had spent a decade fighting tooth and nail, scraping by just to give his daughter a chance. 2 days ago he was opening the wrong door. Today he had secured a future of unimaginable opportunity. He simply nodded, overwhelmed. Thank you, Vexa. Thank you. Vexa looked at him, not as a superior but as an ally. Now we must discuss your own future. Your cover has been blown, albeit heroically. You cannot return to your job on Concord Reach. Carwell's associates will be seeking vengeance. I figured as much, Atticus said, resigned. I'll take the money and move us to a remote colony, start over. Something quiet. Nonsense, Vexa declared. I did not put you through all this just to send you back to scrubbing pipes on a cold planet. The Volari Protectorate owes you a debt of service. Moreover, I trust you completely, which is a commodity rarer than star diamonds in the diplomatic corps. She extended her hand toward him, a formal Volari gesture of partnership. Atticus Kane. I'm offering you a new role. You will be my cultural liaison and confidential operative advisor. Your knowledge of human ingenuity, your clarity of thought, and your ability to work outside the rigid security structure are invaluable assets. You will live aboard the Nethralis Ascendant as a respected consultant. Your daughter, Scout, will accompany you. She will attend the most prestigious schools on our station and receive an education that crosses species and galactic boundaries. Atticus stared at her, stunned. A future not of survival but of purpose, adventure, and respect. It was a complete reversal of his entire life narrative. A cultural liaison, he managed. I'm a mechanic. You are a man who understands human motivations better than any diplomat I have ever met, Vexa insisted. And you are the only man who knows the structural weaknesses of my ship. You are exactly what I need. Atticus took a shaky breath. This wasn't just a job, it was a chance to give Scout the universe. I accept, he said, taking her hand. His rough, calloused palm met her smooth, cool one, a silent affirmation of their improbable partnership. 2 days later, Atticus stood at the main observation deck of Concord Reach, holding Scout's hand. The Nethralis Ascendant was preparing for departure, its massive, bioluminescent hull shimmering against the starfield. Is she sad, Dad? Scout Vale asked, looking up at him. She was holding a new leather-bound copy of a Valari Star Mythology book, her new uniform already packed for her new school. Is Vexa sad? Atticus corrected, smiling slightly. Yes, he said honestly. But I think she's also happy. Is that strange? Scout looked at the towering alien ship, its engines slowly warming up. No, Dad. I think that's just what feelings are like when you're an adult. Complicated. Atticus chuckled and squeezed her hand. When did you get so wise? I learned from the two best teachers, Scout replied simply, looking at him and then at the massive vessel. They watched together as the Nethralis Ascendant smoothly detached from the dock. It was a vision of aquatic grace, maneuvering through the controlled space around Concord Reach. It aligned itself for the jump to the distant, dangerous quadrant of Karath Vex. Then, with a silent flash of light, the ship engaged its drives, shrinking instantly from a floating city to a point of light among the stars, then to a memory of someone who would return. Atticus Kane, former maintenance technician, now cultural liaison and operative advisor, single father to a brilliant daughter, and partner to a diplomat who saw in him more than just his past. He turned from the observation window, heading back into the station. He had work to do, policies to review, human interest programs to develop, a daughter to raise and a future to build. Somewhere light years away, someone had accidentally opened a door, and found exactly what they were unconsciously searching for. Not a closet, not a mistake, but two individuals from vastly different worlds who found the courage to trust, to hope, and to finally open their own doors to a better, brighter future. And that, my friends, is the incredible journey of Atticus Kane and Diplomat Vexa. A testament to how even the smallest mistake can open up the biggest opportunities. If this story, filled with redemption, hope, and an unexpected love across the cosmos, resonated with you, please hit that like button right now. Every like helps us reach more story lovers. Don't forget to share and subscribe to join our growing community of listeners. Check out the channel playlist for more deeply moving and engaging stories like this one. What was your favorite part of Atticus's transformation? Let me know in the comments below, and please send in your audience suggestions for our next epic tale. Thank you for watching, and may your own future be as bright and star-filled as Scout's. Good wishes, everyone.